your ride is taking you through, right? Let's make sure we get okay with that recording. But yeah, your ride's taking you through Hindustan Lever and Colgate and Nestle. And you yourself, by your own admission, say it was almost an accident that you came into the corporate world. I think it's a good accident that happened. A loss to the IS services was a gain to the corporate world. And I'm thrilled to have you today on behalf of Prakash and Penguin. How are you doing, Suresh? Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you, Raunak, for inviting me. And of course, I would not miss a book launch of good friend Prakash, and look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't wait to hear a little more from you. And I must ask you at the top itself, the book that Prakash has written, as you know, a lot of you will come to know in time. It's life lessons, practical advice, wisdom that's timeless. So tell me, Suresh, you've had a slight glance of it. If you had to go back, you just completed a milestone, 40 years in your field. If you had to, give what you know at this stage, 40 years later, to the guy who started off as a management trainee at Hindustan Lever, how handy do you think a book like this would have been back then?
Well, I would really start by telling the guy or the lady, as the case may be, that how come no one told me this when I started this career? And I think it's with the benefit of hindsight and benefit of experience, you can recreate and reframe some of the issues you've been through. So I think it's extremely relevant in this day and age.
All right, absolutely. So thanks so much, Rish. We'll keep this conversation going. And of course, our second special guest for this evening, if you know Prakash, you've seen his books, you spend some time with him, you see those two cricket bats in his screen. He's even got the MCG customized for this interaction today at my place. You'll know that cricket can never be too far away from his heart or from anything associated with him. So we have to have somebody that's, representing the field, and who better than someone who donned the India cap 38 times in his career. My God, he was so stylish, should have played a bit more, but let's not get into that. That's a long time back. More recently, of course, distinguished as a celebrated coach of the Indian women's cricket team, and a man who wears many hats: broadcaster today, coach, cricketer. And if you followed his lockdown YouTube interaction series Inside Out, you'd be worried if you were a young man who's presenting cricket and asking questions in cricket, because W.V. Raman is pretty good at that as well. Raman, good evening. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. It's great to be a part of this launch. And Prakash also appeared on one of the shows. He was instrumental in giving his views on various things about leadership, which is well received. It is beneficial to a lot of you. Series of podcasts is all about, to try and put out information which will be beneficial for the people. I'm sure this book will be well received as well as his earlier books. And I wish Prakash all the very best.
Yeah, we can't wait to chat a little more about it. So you had the first sort of ebook version to this book. Last year was your interaction with Prakash, and he probably gave you something. You've always been a fan of this side of the world, haven't you, W? When it comes to the corporate world, how people lead their teams, that's something that you have a lot of regard for, I think.
Yeah, I do, because I also spent about 2 decades in the corporate world before I sort of dived headlong into coaching, which was my passion. So I can relate to it, if not, say that I know something about it. I can relate to at least what is spoken. I can hold my own.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's got a lot in common, the two fields. And of course, Prakash, like I said, is now the coach. Prakash Iyer went from the corporate genius that he was, that started off at Hindustan Lever, to PepsiCo, to Infomedia, and finally to Kimberly-Clark Lever. And here we are now. He calls himself, like I said, an uncertified cricket junkie, but his reading of the game is a lot better than that. And now, after the habit of winning and the secret of leadership, and you too can, it's how come no one told me that. Prakash, good evening and welcome to your own evening. And thank you so much for allowing me to make the introduction of someone that I've looked up to for so many years. This should be fun.
I'm so looking forward to this, Ron. Thank you so much for being here. Suresh, WV, can't tell you how special this is for me that, you've taken the time to be here today. And for all those of you who've actually got onto this meeting, just can't say thank you in a big enough way. I wish this was a physical bookstore and we would have had a chance to kind of, wear those masks and not hug each other and, rub knuckles and say, good to see you. But even that would have been so much fun. But hey, thanks for being here. And I hope, we can have some fun as we go through the next hour. So back to you, Ron.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, it's brilliant. We've got 180 odd. We must take the best of what we can in these times. And the fact remains that maybe in normal times, we'd not have got so many of you that I'm sure are joining in from different cities and different parts of the world, all making sure that you join in from your time zones and bang on time, I must say. So this is unique in its own way. Otherwise, we would have had to do this perhaps in pockets in different cities or different bookstores. But 180 and counting would fill up most banquets and most auditoriums and certainly most bookstores these days. So it's already a packed house, and let's treat it as such. Before we get in conversation about the book and more, there's some wonderful storytelling that we could also run through with Suresh and Raman and Prakash. There's also a story that's growing now with Prakash and Penguin India. As we know that The Habit of Winning, a bestseller, was Prakash's first book. Penguin was there for that journey then. And then came The Secret of Leadership. So Prakash picks his years also, which are significant for Indian cricket. You had the World Cup win in 2011. You had India's last ICC trophy win in 2013. And here we are in 2021 as the relationship is rekindled with Penguin. And we have another ICC event in some time. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this pattern continues. But before I get into the conversation, might I invite Prakash's editor at Penguin, Ms. Radhika Marwa, if she'd like to say a few words, please. Hi, Radhika. Good evening.
Good evening. Congratulations, Prakash. This is so wonderful. Thank you so much, Raunak, for that introduction. I can't tell you how excited we all are at Penguin to finally be publishing Prakash's third book. It's been a long time coming. He gave us a really hard time because he's been on to more fun projects. He's been writing so much. He has a fantastic following. But we all know that, nothing really says it like a book. So we're so honored, so proud to publish How Come No One Told Me That. It's a fantastic book. It has these timeless nuggets that I feel that people can go back to just, kind of, even after reading it, it's a book that you will flip through when you're feeling off on a day. You're looking for a shot of inspiration. And who better than Prakash to really give you that? So congrats, Prakash, and I'm so excited for everyone to read this book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Radhika. And you have no idea how proud I feel about the association with Penguin. And thank you so much for being there and for pushing me to do this. What she hasn't told you, of course, is that, I'd go back to Radhika with these brilliant ideas that I think I have in my head. And she'll say, nah, I don't think that'll work. or even better, that's not a book. That's probably a Netflix series. Maybe there's an idea there somewhere.
Which is so much better in these days, Prakash. We all know that. But book plus Netflix is what we are hoping for from you.
Inshallah.
Over to you, Raunak.
Thank you so much, Radhika. That was fun. And I could see that the editors still don't lose their, their intrinsic sort of nature. There's a little bit of pressure that's already put on you, Prakash, to not make her wait as much for the next book, not give her such a hard time.
Absolutely. This has been excruciating. So Prakash, now we're going to be churning those out like we discussed.
Yes, we shall.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much, Radhika. That was Radhika Marwa, of course, Prakash's editor at Penguin. Brilliant to have her. So let's get into the conversation now, right? Tell you a little more about the book, but more importantly, tell you some stories and run through Suresh and Raman's experiences. And I've had the good fortune of reading this book. Before I get into it and get into each of those, might I request Suresh, as well as Raman and Prakash, to just hold up what is this extremely good looking, cover that I'm sure the creative team at Penguin have put a lot of time into, perhaps more time than Prakash put, made you wait for, Radhika, but that's it. So How Come No One Told Me That by Prakash Iyer, and Penguin is all set. There we have it. We've got the ebook as well that features. That's good. Brilliant. Okay, that was fun. Like I said, these are different times, right? You'd rather want to do this with one wrapped book and some ribbons and some scissors and some photographers. But the best we're going to make of it is a screenshot now in such times. But anyway, right. So let's get into the book and let's get into some storytelling. I hope you'll be with us as the conversation continues to flow for the next 45 minutes. And we do invite some questions towards the end of this chat, which we're hoping to wind up at about 7 o'clock. So please, hang around and engage. If you're watching on Facebook Live, then feel free to post some comments if you'd like. We'll be happy to take them towards the end of the chat. So Prakash, if I can now, get into some storytelling with you. And first, before we even get into the book itself, I must ask you about the title. How Come No One Told Me? That's always a curious thing as to how an author decides on his title.
So maybe there's a backstory to that. And I must start with, let's say, the first book that I wrote for Penguin. I had this fabulous idea for a title for that book. Okay. And the title for that book was The Salad Bar.
Okay.
Okay. And I thought, just like a salad bar, which used to be pretty cool in hotels at that time, where you could walk in, pick up anything at any stage. There's no sequence. You didn't have to take the beetroot first and the corn next. So you could read this book in any form, and all of it was good for you. So this is Prakash Iyer at his genius best saying, let's call it The Salad Bar. And Penguin says, yeah, interesting. But you know what? It won't sell. Because A, people will think it's a cookery book. And B, you'd really have like those 2 seconds and perhaps one spine, which is really less than an inch, for a person to decide if they want that book. So you probably need to be a little sharper in terms of telling them what's in that book. And I remember that's how The Habit of Winning was born. And with that, I kind of gave up on my attempt to try and suggest a title to Penguin. So The Secret of Leadership looked like a nice sequel. But when I was writing this book, I must confess, my initial thoughts were we'd probably go somewhere down the road of life lessons from the School of Life, or getting better, or some such title which I thought will fly with Penguin. But it kept coming back to me as I started writing those stories that it's mostly these moments where you say, how come no one told me that? And to my good fortune, as I kind of suggested to Radhika, and then, kind of waited for her to shoot it down, Radhika immediately responded, said, wow, I love that. And that's how come no one told me that became part of, our language, I guess, for a lot of stuff that we do now.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see, like we were discussing before we started the chat between the 4 of us, this title is going to be invoked a number of times now, right? It's just going to fit right into conversation, perhaps injecting a little bit of humor. And yes, let's get into some of the fine storytelling in the book. In particular, if I want to pick one to start with, there's a story about an alteration tailor, and I'm going to ask Prakash to tell us a little more about that. I'll just give you a quick gist on what it is. It's a great line where he says, we need a friend, partner, mentor, or coach who does for our lives what an alteration tailor does for our clothes. Prakash, tell me a little more on this one first.
So maybe this story in itself is perhaps in some ways representative of the way I might be thinking stories. Okay, so I remember actually reading a little snippet somewhere. I think this might have been in what was E.T. Panache, which did this little business supplement, which would also have some stuff outside of business. And there was a stylist who had 5 tips on how to look good. Okay, and interestingly enough, the 5th tip there was get yourself an alteration tailor. And I thought that was interesting. Didn't think that a stylist would tell you to get an alteration tailor. But as I thought of it, I thought, it's such a cool idea, because very often, we've all had this challenge that it's a lovely shirt, the collar is just right, but the sleeve is too long. And then when you wear it with your jacket, it doesn't feel so good. Or there is this lovely trouser which used to fit you like a shirt, but now that you put on that ½ an inch, it's a little too tight and therefore doesn't feel as good. And what you really need is an alteration tailor to perhaps set that right or fix that little button. All of us have that shirt lying in our wardrobe, perhaps, which hasn't been worn because the button is missing, and how an alteration tailor can fix that. But what struck me was, maybe we need an alteration tailor in our lives, not just for our clothes. And sometimes if you're at work, the best thing you can find, even in your life, the best thing you can get is someone who's willing to point out those little flaws and help you set it right, who's willing to tell you that, maybe a good idea to stop doing this a little bit, or maybe start doing something else, or, you don't realize it, you've got a strength which is not being leveraged. So maybe an alteration tailor, which could be a friend, mentor, coach, colleague, spouse, friend, I think is an invaluable asset to have in your life.
As someone who's sort of relatively early in his professional career, I can see the importance of it at an early stage. So I could only wonder, what it could have been for someone like Suresh going 40 years back, if he can think of who played the role, Suresh, of an alteration tailor back then, a mentor, a coach, who probably gave you that, first bit of criticism or advice that you still remember after all these years. Suresh?
Well, I think, Raunak, in my case, I was really a person who wasn't looking for a suit because I was really not even trained and cut out for the corporate world. I mean, I was neither, as I say, I'm neither an accountant, nor an MBA, nor an IIT engineer. None of the, I'm not like Prakash. I am Ahmedabad, gold minted. I was from the Delhi School of Economics, which is very famous, very well known, but they don't produce corporate leaders. They produce economists and public policy experts. So I was one of those who really wasn't looking for for suit. Once I in corporate world by accident. I think this particular phrase, "How come no one told me that," became even more apparent because a lot of things I didn't know. And one of the first things that you learn when you don't know a lot of things, you learn humility. You know that this is not the zone in which you have expertise. I knew about monetary policy and I knew about fiscal economics, but I didn't know about management of demand and management of channels, and those kind of stuff was beyond me. And therefore, I think I've had numerous people in my early stages of my career who have very gently nudged me. Firstly on communication, secondly on executive presence, thirdly on using those acetates, writing neatly and because those are not the PPT days. Fourthly, I think one of the stories that Prakash talks about that the white handkerchief. I was actually made to clean dalda tins, in Jodhpur as a trainee salesman, by my late supervisor then. And one of the lessons he taught me then was so useful. Raman and Kapoor, for people on the call who know him, well, God bless his soul. He told me, he made me clean these tins in 45-degree shade and then called me to the hotel. He says, "Beta, come in the evening, let's have a drink." And I sat there and Kapoor said, "Beta, ek din tu ASM banega. You will become an ASM one day. Tu mera boss banega. But remember, if you don't know the basics of what the other guy does, you can never become a good leader." And I think that lesson has always stayed with me, the humility to accept what everyone does and the ability and the perspective to learn a little bit about what they do. And here was an alteration tailor who literally taught me my first lesson that, look, my friend, if you have to be a successful sales manager, you better know what the salesman does. And thereon, there have been other people who have mentored me and who have helped me along in the journey. But I really think, the alternation tailor concept is so very important, And sadly, many of us in today's world are dominated by our own egos and insecurities to even look for an alteration tailor.
Yeah, I think that's very pertinent. And if someone can relate to being the alteration tailor for a lot of people, it's Raman. As a coach, I'm trying to think, Raman, both sides of it, something you can shed light on, where that, Suresh talks about a little bit of a nudge. Sometimes that nudge is little, but like Suresh said towards the end, our skin is so thin, it pierces right through, and suddenly we're not in a world that is openly accepting criticism. I'm sure you faced your share of experiences with that. Can you think of firstly a mentor or an alteration tailor perhaps that you had in your early days, and now that you are one yourself, a coach to many others, how that sort of nudge is sometimes hard to achieve a balance for?
The first kind of alteration was done to me by my mother. So I was in my 8th standard. We played inter-school junior game. We lost it. We were 4 for 40 down, and I was batting and took the score to 160. And then I was bowling those days as well. So we lost a close game by about 3 runs. And the physical director of my school was disappointed, obviously. We fought well, we lost. By then, he said something to the effect that if we had done a little better, we could have won the game. So I thought 4 wickets and 45 something was a decent outing for anybody in an inter-school junior game. So we lost the game, and immediately after the game, somebody saying that was perhaps a little bit too much to take. I went back home. I was sulking for 2 days. I probably was not even eating properly. My mother, being the stoic and full of common sense that she was, she let me, sort of carry on with whatever my tantrums were for 2 days. And on the third morning, she said, "Did you start playing cricket to enjoy yourself or to sort of sulk like this?" And the second thing she said, "If you can't move on in life, you stop playing this game, let alone, forget making a career out of it." So there it was, it really woke me up. I said, yes, correct. Why did I start playing cricket? To have good fun, to make friends, and then have a good time. And because I was probably good at it. So I said, from that day, I never ever looked back in life, not even for a minute. It was always about today and the next minute. And that was the first kind of alteration. In terms of me, on the other side of the fence, making alterations, there have been many instances, but the most satisfying thing for me was, it was a long drawn process, but still it was definitely very, very satisfying. And I'm sure that his case, I'm talking about Lakshmipati Balaji, his case is definitely something that is highly inspirational. There he was in mid-20s, on the verge of a great career, suddenly breaks down due to a back injury, has to undergo surgery. Then he had to do rehab, he had to remodel his action. I had to sort of, start from scratch in terms of his rehab and remodeling his action, helping him out. Not that I did it. It was easy for me to guide, but the most important thing was that Lakshmipati Balaji had the attitude and the will to do what was really, really tough. I think it is something of a real effort for somebody to sort of do what he did in terms of emotionally handling it, in terms of going through the physical rigors, and in terms of being patient for a period of 2 years. And every day, when he wakes up, he would have thought about the fact that, oh, am I going to ever play cricket? Because he was perhaps not good at many things those days. Yes. In the last few years, he's picked up a lot of things outside of cricket, but then he could hardly do anything except play cricket. I imagine what are the thoughts that would have gone through his mind to come over them and to overcome all the obstacles he had in terms of recovering after his surgery, and then going through the paces, and then making a comeback into the Indian side, and then playing cricket for 8 years or 10 years, highly competitive cricket at that. And I think that is some achievement. I don't think anybody else has done it in India. There have been many fast bowlers who had a back problem, who've gone through surgeries, but I don't think they've returned to cricket, at least competitive cricket, or made a comeback into the Indian side. I think those two instances really are something that will stay with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I'm just seeing some of the comments as well. Ashok Malhotra saying, great insight of an alteration tailor. I had one, my father. Raman talks about his mother. I think de facto alteration tailors, Prakash, tend to be the parents early on.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's a spouse.
Yeah, she's mentioned very often in that.
Yeah.
The alteration tailor normally takes, the measurements and follows it. I don't know if the wife, the spouse, puts in measurements of her own and goes the other way around. But I was curious to hear what Suresh said towards the end. Of perhaps it's unfortunate that it's not easy today to just give a little bit of criticism. It's not as simple as that. Do you see that more a recent trend, Suresh? Of late, suddenly everyone's gotten a little too thin-skinned, where perhaps it wasn't as much a decade or so back?
I think I can unlike Raman, who can talk so well about sport, I can only talk about the corporate world and the kind of leaders that we are starting to see now come into the world. I think it stems from our education system. Our education system is so much dependent on individual excellence. Forget the cramming part of it and forget the way in which we examine and educate our young. But we are really focusing so much on picking up the so-called, hard skills of doing of making a life and making a career. A good computer programmer, or a good finance expert, or a great marketer, or a good HR person. We have really put back and set back the ability to put in purpose, values, and a moral compass into the lives of our young. And I think today, when I meet a lot of youngsters, my own company is 70, almost 80% millennials. I find youngsters who are so clever. I mean, they will beat me under the table on anything on technology, anything on strategy. They're far, far cleverer than what I can ever hope to be. But the tripwires are simple behavioral issues, simple attitude issues, simple resilience. It has got nothing to do with gender, background, or income, or any of those things. But you find that there is a lack of that kind of education, which I'm afraid, like Raman said, comes from your mother, like Ashok said, comes from your father. In my case, I went to a school called Rishi Valley. I think it's the best school on the planet. I mean, I'm an open votary of that school. And the philosophy of J. Krishnamurti and the simple fact that he said that the Guru is within you, I think kindled a lot of introspection and building the blocks of purpose, values, behavior, decency, respect, and all the things today, which we somehow think is not fashionable. We've become so materialist. We've become so much, it's like, Prakash is proud to be a coach. I don't think he wants to be known as managing director of Kimberly-Clark Lever, right? I would like to be known more as a human being, as a good, decent, honest human being, rather than as the chairman and managing director of Nestle, because these are all fleeting. These are all coming, it comes one day and goes the next day. So I really think that if our education system takes care of some of these aspects of building character, building purpose, building values, and providing a moral compass, I think we will have great people and great organizations. And I keep saying this. I said, if companies invest more in culture than in capex, you will have better run organizations, for sure. For sure.
Prakash, I'm sure you echo all of this because I've seen the end of the book. So take it away.
No, I think this is such an interesting thought, Suresh, and and I'm now saying this both as someone I've known as a friend and a colleague for many years, and someone I've grown to admire. And I think this is fantastic. Suresh referred to how sometimes we have an alteration tailor in our lives, but we don't want to turn to them for help. And it's your ego that can come in the way. It's this fear of being told that something is not right. And I think just having a mindset which says, it's all right, I can get better and I can learn from other people and I can lean on other people for help. I think it's such a powerful thought. And when you talk about, Suresh, having 80% of your workforce being millennials, I can imagine just saying, hey, I don't have all the answers and I'm willing to learn. And at the end of it all, and this is something, Suresh, I've tried to refer to in this book at the end, I don't think we want to be remembered as saying, when it's all over and we are dead and gone, I don't think someone's going to say, oh, he's such a fine person. Yeah, he had 2 flats in South Mumbai. Nobody's going to say that, right? They're going to talk about, hey, what kind of a colleague was this? Did he make a difference? Did she make a difference to my life? Did I learn something from them? Was she a good friend, a spouse, a brother, a sister, colleague? I think we all need to figure that's what really matters. And I think those tripwires that you talk about are really, when you get so caught up in thinking of success in one dimension, bigger title, bigger role, more money, more stock ops, more, versus saying, hey, did I make a difference to the world that I live in? I think that is such a powerful thought. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it is something which is echoed in, how come no one told me that? There's a chapter dedicated. It's really moving on. It's a fitting way to, to culminate the book with where Prakash writes about what you want your legacy to be or what it ought to be, what you aspire for your legacy to be. So, and all sentiments that are corroborated or ratified by Suresh. So, you could come to that. Suresh made a reference to a story called The White Handkerchief. For those of you that may not have sort of picked it up, where you had Suresh at a younger stage of his corporate career actually cleaning dalda tins on top. Prakash, you want to just quickly tell us what the context of that story is, a little bit, maybe in brief, and then I'll move on.
Yeah, so it's one of those legends at Hindustan Lever, which is about, the chairman of the company being on a market visit in Kerala. And there are these dalda tins. So dalda was a brand of Vanaspati that we used to sell in those days. And there are these dalda tins kept over there. And it was the done thing, if the chairman is visiting a market, then everything is, I'm sure Suresh, it still happened. Everything is dressed up. The products look good. It's all cleaned out. And guess what? The chairman gets into that store and discovers a tin of dalda with dust on it. Now, that's a food product, having dust on it is a complete no-no. And it was a chairman who was known to kind of lose his cool and give it to people. And guess what he does, right? He doesn't shout and scream and ask a sales guy or the distributor, why is it so dirty? Why is it like this? All he does is puts his hand in his pocket, pulls out what looks like a nicely starched, clean white handkerchief and cleans that tin on his own. And I think that is a message to an entire organization, indeed to an organization which has seen so many people come and, and benefit from it, that, hey, no job is too small. It's not as if cleaning the dalda tin is somebody else's responsibility, right? And the chairman is kind of leading from the front and saying, hey, I'll do that as much as anybody else will. And I think it's great to be that kind of leader. And I've seen that in operation, in action so many times with so many other fabulous leaders I've been privileged to work with.
Yep, it's a terrific story. I'm getting a lot of good comments as well, which is going to make my job a bit harder towards the end, because there are such good questions coming in at 6:30 only, and we still got another 15-20 minutes of conversation. But I can see a lot of echoing of the sentiment of investing in culture, in companies. That's been endorsed. I'll come say Shadri Vishwanathan Singh Prakash Iyer has been the best alteration tailor for many like me, and happy for that. So we've got an alteration tailor on the panel, got a couple of them, 3 of them actually. So anyway, keep the comments coming. Hope you're enjoying it. We'll keep this chat running. Prakash just spoke about the importance of making things look good, not just for the chairman, but generally. He's also dedicated a couple of chapters in this book on judging a book by its cover, but there's a context to it. It's not about removing that or condemning that old adage. So judging a book by its cover, because everyone does. And there's also one of what will people think. They both sort of get into, how much we focus on visual sort of cues and how much we decide on the basis of what is visually appealing to us. Prakash, tell us a little more about those two, and then I'd love to get into a conversation with Raman and then Suresh.
So I think one of the interesting things is that we often tend to think of ourselves as saying, my performance will speak for itself, my ability will speak for itself, and that the packaging doesn't matter or how it looks may not matter. And part of this whole idea of how come no one told me that is to challenge some of these popular beliefs that we might have had. And we tend to start thinking of them as gospel truths. And this is a reference actually to an interesting little piece of research that was done by a professor called Young Sai. Let me try and explain it to you very, very simply. There was this piano performance competition, and think of it as an equivalent of an Indian Idol. They took the recordings of all these, of the 10 contestants who were there in a piano competition, and they tried to show it to random groups of people to try and judge which of these people do you think won the competition. Okay. And here was the interesting bit. They had 3 groups. One group saw only the video. They couldn't hear the audio of the performance. Another group heard the audio, but couldn't see the videos. Okay. And the third, of course, had both audio and video. And guess what? The people who saw only the videos actually did a better job of predicting who the winner was. Okay. That says something to us, and I think for all of us, it's important to recognize that it's not only about being terrific, being good at what you do. Optics matters, and it's the reality of our world. And it's important for us to kind of not ignore it completely and say, hey, how can I make sure that I can get it right even without that? So that's the story. And then what does it mean for us?
The optics matter, what you look at and how your, whether you accept it or not, how that plays a role in your decision making, perhaps is not, enhanced more than in the field of cricket. So let me come to Raman now, because, one conversation that we keep having, WV, is always, oh my God, how is Rohit Sharma not playing every format? He's so good looking. How is KL Rahul not playing, every format? He's so good looking. You don't mind giving him another chance. You don't mind, pushing him ahead of the queue at the top of the order in Test cricket, because you think, my God, such a good looking player. Whereas you think somebody like a Bichara Pujara has to struggle all his life, the minute a couple of low scores and you think, no, not him. Do you relate to that, being a very fluent and talented batter yourself in your time? Do you think that bias is perhaps, I'm not even calling it bias in a negative sense. Prakash just puts it down as the harsh reality. You will be judged on how you look. Isn't that something that cricket has followed for a long time?
Yeah, that's true almost in all aspects of life, if you care to look at it. Yes, you would always tend to lean towards players who are easy on the eye, who you think, make it look easy, and rather than look at players who are really sort of fighting hard for the cause of the team. Now, that happens. There's nothing much you can do about it. But the fact of the matter, at the end of the day, it's about what it is that you are contributing towards the team. It's just that, you can't just always have the glam boys for the sake of having them. You need to have somebody there who's going to sort of do the dirty work, get his hands dirty, who's going to stand guard there, who's going to take body blows, and then, ensure that the team is going to across the line. You need such boys as well. That is the case even in the corporate world. You can have your glam boys, who can have the glamorous stars now who achieve their targets far more sooner than the rest of the pack. But still, you need to have the others as well in the mix for an organization to succeed. That, again, optics are there. Yes, you can't sort of do very much about it. Again, it's a matter of perception. Perceptions do matter in life, but that is not everything.
Jairam's got a lovely comment. Tara Sinha, the advertising doyen, said, switch off the audio in a TV advert, and if the message gets through, that advert has worked. So we come to Suresh as well. Prakash writes in his book, Suresh, that there are a lot of people that put looking good ahead of being effective. Now, I'm trying to see, from your experience, if you can think of something like that.
Look, I think, Raunak, there was just a few days back, I believe, there was a research that was published. A very respectable piece of research that said that good-looking men and women get recruited, get promoted, and have better careers than not so good-looking people, perceptions. Now, this is the 21st century. This is a century where gender and race and creed and all these things should matter much less than what it was 2-3 centuries ago. But that is the reality. I think, the more holistic an organization is in terms of how it recognizes, how it rewards, and how it elevates its people into leadership positions, the less you have these cases. But indeed, that is true. That is true. I mean, if you look at around you, as Raman rightly said, being easy on the eye, or being glib-tongued, or being a super smooth fellow at a meeting, is always considered to be a great virtue. And in fact, organizations spend a lot of time in training programs. I remember to have attended programs on improving your communication skills or becoming more aggressive as a leader. But the sad part about training programs is you can only train what is in. You can't train what is out. And that is the tragedy, that you're telling fellows to improve this and get your executive presence right. I'm not saying this in a negative sense, but if somebody is less than 5 foot tall, you can't expect him to have a kind of executive presence of a 6-footer or a 7-footer. So we have set for ourselves these unhealthy paradigms of what we believe are effective, strong leaders. We believe that physical build and demeanor and tenor of speaking and stuff like that is far more important than merit. And that is why I think the point that Prakash talked about, we always are in that ironic situation where we judge a great concert by looking at the video with the audio switched off. I mean, this is exactly what we do. We don't sometimes we don't, in meetings, we don't listen to the person. We keep looking at that person, and thereby we say good guy, because he makes the right kind of body signals. And many of us know, and there are careers that have been made in 5 minutes of spiel in front of the right guy. And there are other fellows who sweat it out for 20 years in the boondocks, and the poor fellows don't find the light of day simply because they are not as evocative communicators, or they're not as good looking. So it is a sad reality. It is a sad reality. I hope that some of us are able to, at least in our own lives, try and change it as best as we can. But it is something that we have to live with.
Yeah, I can see the comments that come in, and this is, I think, a subject that would probably have touched a nerve of maybe a young professional or a seasoned professional. Sandeep says there are many unconscious biases at play. The first step is to recognize that we all have them and then do something about them. Normally, neither of these are done. Meenakshi saying sometimes raw is also glam, like the early versions of Dhoni and Kapil Dev. Being seen as smart, says Jairam, and that is looking fit, dressing smart, speaking with confidence, is something that everyone can acquire. So, I mean, no one's on the other side of what Suresh said, right? But Prakash's point on the book was perhaps because it is a harsh reality, it's just something that is worth knowing, worth focusing on, right, Prakash?
Yeah, I think a lot of our lives is about finding that balance and not being too caught up in a particular corner. And for many of us, our corner becomes the right corner. And the point I want to make is that, none of us wants to believe, none of us wants to live in a world where we actually say that appearances matter. To Suresh's point, after all these years, we still have these, these biases at work. So I think it's good for us to recognize and not to poo-poo and dismiss that other school of thought. Because sometimes you can be very good. And to Suresh's point, if you're so good, you'll wonder, why am I spending 20 years in the boondocks while somebody else gets away with it? And maybe to Jairam's point here, there may be simple solutions, just focus on getting small things right. Because remember, at the end of it, we look at people through all our senses. And if it's an interview situation, it's not as if you're shutting your eyes and listening to the intellect that's coming at you. You're looking at that person. So I think that makes a difference.
Yeah. On a lighter note, I'll take a couple of comments. A.V. Pati says, Prakash, you are good looking too, with a capital TOO. So in case there was any sort of shortage of validation or self-confidence, please thank A.V. Pati for that, Prakash. And I quite like this one as well from Seema. My son's university at Hong Kong research that a good looking mechanical engineer, which he is, have a lesser chance to be recruited than a sober one, which is, I mean, I'll leave it there. I'm just reading the comment without adding a comment. So good on you guys to be part of the conversation and continue to, add to it. Let's move on, right? And we talk about people here. I can see Suresh has a huge investment when it comes to identifying people, packing people, the culture. It's something that Prakash speaks a lot of in his book, the importance that he invests, in people. And how well do you really know your people is another fine chapter dedicated to it. It's something that goes back to an interaction Prakash had with Saurav Ganguly. So Prakash, more from you.
Yeah, so this is Saurav's book launch in Mumbai, in Pune, at an SIBM, and I had the privilege of hosting that conversation with him. And the question that I had was around that time, KL Rahul was not in the team, was not making it, and you thought he was such a talented batsman, and there was so much, we're struggling with our batting. So how come KL Rahul doesn't make it to the team? And of course, sort of first make sure that, this is not being recorded and there's no media. And he doesn't realize that it could still be used in a book launch a couple of years later. But he talks about how the problem is, he says that you need the captain to know his talent, to know his players. And he said there's so much cricket happening now that captains and coaches don't seem to have the time to invest to understand talent. And he also referred to this in the context of what was it about him that he backed people. So if you look at a Bhaji or a Zahir Khan or a Yuvraj Singh or even a Sehwag, they'll all tell you how they thought that Dada backed them. And his point was that once you get to know talent, you will have the confidence to back them. And I think the equivalent for that would be, as leaders in the corporate world, don't go by what what is his appraisal rating over the last 3 years? What does the HR scorecard tell me about the person? I think you need to invest in knowing your people. And I had a boss at PepsiCo, a man called Suman Sinha, who also was our boss, was also a boss at Hindustan Lever for a while. He had this remarkable ability to actually get down to understanding that person he's talking to talk to the sales guy, to talk to that sales officer and understand who they are. And he had this ritual every year during annual appraisal time. Now, imagine you're the CEO or the chairman of a business and you have so many people to worry about, but he would want to get into the appraisal discussion of every sales officer in the company. Yeah. And it was his way of saying, this is not time I'm wasting. This is time I'm investing in understanding my people. And he'd want to get into understanding everybody, what makes them tick. He would relate it to what happened when I visited Mehsana market with that person? What did he see over there? So I think this is a great ability to have for all of us, where if you start knowing your people, you'll start backing them, you'll take a punt on them, you will get better with using your team than if you just went by what other people said about them.
It seems like such simple, sound wisdom, knowing your talent, the importance of knowing your talent. Raman, it seems so simple, but is it really in reality? Whenever we discuss Indian cricket, we are always discussing selection. We attribute selection as a result of performance and success. You were part of the women's team. Do you see different captains who just see things differently, sometimes fail to identify talent, and there goes a chance of great players not necessarily winning as much as they should have? I mean, is the concept of knowing your talent easier on paper than it is in reality?
I would want to talk about it in a broader sense. I'll restrict myself to sort of narrating my own experiences. I was a captain of the South Zone side in the mid-90s, which had two youngsters in the ranks. They did well, both obviously, were middle order batsmen. One was called VVS Lakshman, the other fellow was called Rahul Dravid. So at the end of the tournament, we had a press conference. So somebody can check it up in the Lucknow edition of the Indian Express. So I was asked as to what do you think has come out of this Duleep Trophy. I said Indian cricket has found two guys who will be pillars of the batting lineup in the years to come. And he said, who? I said, obviously it's Lakshman and Dravid. That happened. And when I was the coach of the Bengal side, I happened to notice a medium pacer named Shami, and he had not yet broken into the Bengal side. So had to really sort of work hard in convincing the selection committee to bring him in. And I even had the sort of gall to say that this guy, if you pick him now in 18 months' time, he'll go on to play for the country. And as things panned out, the timetable happened to be, on the dot. He made his debut for India 18 months later. And the most interesting thing was that when I went as the coach of the India under-19 side in 2008 or 9, somewhere it was, when Virat Kohli led the side, there is a written report of mine wherein I have stated that this boy will go on to play for the country. And I also see him going on to lead the country at some point, once he makes his debut for the country and establishes himself. So somebody even asked me as to what is that you've seen in 15 days, which has made you, say so much about one particular boy. I've said what I had to say, and hopefully we'll all be alive to see, whether I've, spoken sense or I've sort of really sort of made an ass of myself. So obviously, what has happened. Virat has gone on to lead 60 test matches. I think the most important thing is that you should have a very, very not clear lens, I would say. You'll have to clear your head, have an open mind, and then see it without any kind of agenda when you're spotting talent and when you're making an assessment. And the other important thing is also that, like I wrote in my book, it's one thing to assess, another thing to judge. Generally, what happens is that people tend to judge, they don't assess. These are two different things. Yes, like I've said, it's like saying famous and notorious. You would like to be called famous, not notorious, wouldn't you? Similarly, you would like to be assessed, not judged. And that's my take on spotting talent.
So the next question, I think it almost asks itself, Raman. We're in 2021. Come on, tell us now. 2041, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, give me your two players that the world will look back at us and say, oh my God, all-time greats.
No, seriously, I have to see them play in an atmosphere where they're challenged. So I have to see them in the nets. I have to, see them under a certain set of conditions. Then I would be able to, make an assessment. And I'm also somebody who would rather see things differently or focus more about the guys in the team when I'm associated with them. If I see as a spectator, I may not really pay that much attention as I would otherwise. That's my basic nature. I'm sorry.
No problem at all. I wouldn't be surprised if you've got your resume ready. We believe there might be a vacancy at the national team soon. So I'm sure you'll get the chance.
Oh, Q Sarah Sarah.
All right. It's nearing 7. I'd like to take a lot of questions. We're trying to sort of make them part of our conversation because there's so many good ones. But maybe we could just do a couple of more stories. Prakash, you're going to tell me how much time you want to sort of keep for all the questions. But the one thing that I want to certainly discuss is, a chapter that you put in, when I'd love for Suresh to also jump in after you've just given us a brief of it, is never forget the lessons. I think it was one of the best chapters, one of my personal favorites. So you want to just tell us a little bit about that as to the high profile incidents of when someone got it wrong and, the importance of that. And then I'll come to Suresh as well for his experiences. You just need to unmute, Prakash, please. Yeah. Yeah.
How could a launch be complete without somebody having to say you're on mute? Yeah. Sorry. So the thought here was how we all tend to hold on to our achievements and our trophies of success, and most times try and hide our failures. And I think the flip side of this was something that I learned. There used to be a brand manager in Levers who was brand manager for shampoo. And if you walked into his office, what you would see were, great advertising pieces, some of those awards that they might have won, campaign pieces, point of sale material, some great packaging. But also over there was this dirty looking pouch, which was blue in color, which had leaked clearly, and the brand was almost smudged. Okay. Turns out it was a shampoo that was launched by this brand manager. In those days, shampoo was very expensive because they were in expensive packaging, and they had this unique idea of doing a pouch. Okay. And Clinic shampoo in a pouch was this big idea. And it was launched with great fanfare, went into stores. And within 2 weeks, all hell broke loose because the pouches started to leak. And the shampoo from the pouch would then spill onto the creams and the cosmetics. Stores were ruined. Retailers were furious. And we had a lemon in our hands at Hindustan Lever. And this brand manager says, this packaging is here to remind me of the fact that, you need to keep trying new stuff, but don't take shortcuts. If it means you need to research it, test it out for 3 months before you put it in market, don't take shortcuts, but don't let that stop you from innovating. And I thought it was such a powerful idea to say that, keep your failures out there. And then I figured later on, for example, that, Howard Schultz keeps bought a can of a coffee that they launched, a carbonated coffee that Starbucks launched. It bombed. Okay. But he's got that can in front on his table. Okay. As a reminder of what might be. And I think it's a good idea for all of us to perhaps use failure as a reminder of the things we should not do, and also as an inspiration that, hey, go after it and you might actually get it right. So that's what I thought about it.
Suresh, I'm sure there's an experience or two that you could narrate on the same.
Well, yeah, Raunak, what really happens is as you become older, as you become more senior, as you become more respected, you try and hide some of the not so savory incidents of the past. And look, I think failure is the best teacher, and it's also the best palliative for an inflated ego. It's the best solution that you can have. And I always share this with my teams that I launched probably one of the worst disasters in the ready-to-drink market in India, a brand called Treetop, which Prakash will remember, but it's long dead and long gone, and which also incidentally had a packaging problem. The whole laminate delaminated, and we had a huge quality issue on that, and we wrote off I think millions and millions of rupees behind that. But I think it's important to understand and realize that failure teaches us to look at that life has opportunities, some that you're successful with, some you're not successful with, and also to keep your ego in check and to be humble. So every time I react to somebody in my own company, when he comes up with a not so successful launch, I tell him that, don't worry, this too shall pass. We will make successes happen, because I have, the fact is that my own life has had its own fair share of failures and will continue to have its share of failures. And I think it's important to keep yourself feet on the ground and also to keep your ego in check.
Brilliant. Right. Comments coming left, right, and center. I'd like to open it up to them. So before we do go on, I like Sudhir Rao saying, keep going, Raunak, very interesting. We can finish the book right here. Well, we'd love to, but that takes away, right, from the charm of actually taking, this book and taking your time through it, enjoying every chapter, every story as it comes. So before we do open it up for questions and take some more, please put your questions and comments. If you'd like to pose them to anyone in particular, mention that too. And I'm keeping an eye out on the Zoom chat window as well as on the Facebook Live. So make sure you just, fire away, and we'll spend a little time taking your comments and questions. Prakash, before we do get there though, so many fine stories, many of them covered today and further, some enhanced by the experiences of Suresh and Raman. But tell me, if you had to pick sort of one story, as before we move to opening it for the Q&A, that one story you particularly enjoyed writing, or you think that was my best one, which one would it be?
Yeah, kind of tough to try and answer that, but I'd probably say a couple of stories that gave me a lot of joy. One of them was about a lesson that I learned from my first boss at Hindustan Lever, a man called John Aravamudan. And John, if you're listening to this, can't thank you enough for all those lessons. It's a simple story. It was about a time when we were having, he had come to visit me on a contact in Salem. And here we are in a restaurant having dinner at the end of the day. And you know how it is, you're a trainee and you think your evaluation and your confirmation depends on the quality of peanuts being served along with the drinks at dinner. And then the dinner ends and the bill comes, and I'm this guy who's kind of making signals to the waiter to say, give me the check. And when the check comes, I pick it up as if, I'm the host. Yeah, he's come to my market. And he says, no, Prakash, give it to me. And I say, no, John, I'll take care of it. Now, both of us know at the end, it's the company that's going to pay for it. It's not my pocket or his. But I say, no, John, it's okay. I'll pay it. And John says, does his famous chumma irida, which is to say, just shut up, give it to me. And he takes it, pays that bill, and then he explains to me, you know what? The unwritten rule on this is that at every business meeting, the senior most person on the table should pick up the tab. Because if you were to pick up the tab, you would send it to me. I would approve your spend. In a sense, I'm approving my own expenditure. And he says, that is not on. The way to get it right in an organization is to make sure that the senior most person picks up the tab. I still remember that simply because it tells me two or three things. One, if Hindustan Lever is such a great business, such a good company, I think it's because of simple lessons and policies like this one. It's also because they've got people like John Aravamudan out there who not only ensure that the policy is in place, but that they also tell rookie young managers who join the system, that's what it takes to be a great organization. And I thought that was a story that I quite enjoyed, and it's very close to my heart in a sense. So, yeah.
So I'll probably take a comment from both Raman and Suresh on that story before I open it up to some questions. And
I'm also mindful, Ron, that Suresh has a hard stop. So
okay,
we're going to just be mindful of that. He had to leave at 7 o'clock. So anything you do now is the 20% extra you get with Maggi noodles. That's what you have.
Yeah, that's what I said. But that's what I'm saying. I'm taking from Maggi right now. They say 2 minutes on the package, but to really get the best out of it, a few more minutes. Suresh, okay to join us for a few more minutes, or can we thank you right now?
Another maybe 4 or 5 minutes.
All right, sure. Great. So let me just take maybe one or two questions. I can see a lot of appreciation for the chat. Purti says, thank you so much. Insightful thoughts. She asks a question here. Our first impressions really in this last fast-paced world. How should we go about giving second chances or thoughts, if at all? Suresh, you can take that.
Look, I think it's true, sadly. I think she is right. First impressions sometimes become extremely important because that's our first view on the person, and then it takes a Herculean task to unwind it. But really, I honestly believe that as leaders, we have to. It is our job. It is our responsibility to ensure that people are given a second chance. I wrote this about some time back on LinkedIn called the broken matchstick. The matchstick that is broken in my puja. In the morning, I decided to give it one more strike, and it lit. And sadly, we don't give that broken matchstick a second chance. And sometimes these first impressions are like broken matchsticks.
What a powerful story that is, Suresh. Thank you so much for sharing. What a powerful story.
Brilliant. You know, I mean, we could go on with this. It would be my crime if I had to sort of push Suresh to go on and on. I must say that Nescafe cup he's got holding keeps his coffee warm as well. And he's been loyal to his brand from minute one to the end. So we can't thank him enough.
Loyalty, my friend.
Absolutely. Suresh Narayanan, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Raman, it's been brilliant. If you would like, maybe one little thing from you as well. Prakash talks about an early lesson that he picked up on one of his first managers about, you know, who picks up the tab and how it's such a sort of telling lesson he holds till today. I want to ask you two questions on it. One, of course, whether you remember, say, the first lesson that a senior in the team or maybe a coach or someone told you. And second, who picks up the tab normally when the cricketers go out? Is that sort of rule stay when it comes to cricketers going out for a drink or two? You'll have to unmute yourself, Raman. Sorry. Yeah.
In terms of how to value the India cap is something that I was told very early in my life. Venkat Raghavan, my first captain in the state side, asked me to put out his India cap out to dry in the sun. So as he gave it to me, he made it very clear, don't try it on. It should never go anywhere close to your head. I said I had no intention of doing it. I was going to just go out and put it out in the sun to dry. So I put it out and came back. And then he said, you know why? I said, you shouldn't try it on. That is something you got to earn. And it takes a lot of hard work to earn. So even to just try it on, I would not have tolerated you doing it because it takes a lot of hard work. And secondly, you'll only realize the value of an India cap if you earn it and wear it. That is one thing. The thing of taking the tab is always done by obviously the senior cricketer, because those days I grew up in a generation where obviously, you know, the elders would always take care of you and stuff like that. But I think that more or less happens these days also. So that convention continues. There's no issue at all.
Okay, so always try and go out with some senior cricketers then. That should be the convention, not as much with the kids, right? All right, this has been great. I wish we could go on longer. Prakash, I'll leave you for the final word, but it's a big thank you to Raman and Suresh for the time spent. And let's hope, you know, we can get more from them on another day in better times. Prakash, all yours for the last word.
Hey, thank you so much. I just want to say a big thank you to Suresh, to WV, and to you, Raunak, for making this a fun evening and for making this launch, for me at least, very special. And to all of you who kind of stayed on and listened in and contributed with those lovely comments. I just want you to know, I'm going to save all those comments. And if there's something I need to respond to, I will. But you have no idea how much you've done to make this truly special for me. Can't thank you enough. And I wish I could have, someone had told me that, you know what, sometimes just having friends with you in happy moments is what makes those moments really special. How come no one? No. Now I'm going to say, I'm thankful that someone told me that. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening and stay safe. And thanks once again, Suresh and WV.
Cheers. Thank you, Prakash. Thank you, Raunak. Thank you, Raman.
Thank you. And don't forget,
thank you
for the book's on Amazon, right, Prakash? For everybody who wants a little info, it's already out.
It is indeed.
So it's lovely. Get your copy, and hopefully we'll have this conversation again. Big thank you, Suresh Narayanan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Suresh. And thanks, everyone. Sorry, I couldn't answer your questions. I saw a few on the messages. Sorry, I couldn't answer.
No problem. You can bug us on social media if you'd like, but thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. I'm just wondering if there's someone. Here we are. I've got a late entrant right now. Thanks, everybody, and see you. So here we go.